Hey there, good morning everyone. Happy Friday the 13th.
Doesn't feel as spooky as I expected.
Welcome to Bold TV. I'm Carrie Sheffield here with Jessica Tarlov, the Senior Director at Bustle Trends. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's my first ride in the co-host seat.
Yeah, well, you've been on the show multiple times, so
have.
we love you, friend of the show. And also, you've probably seen Jess, if you watch Fox News, she's a contributor there too, where she is a gallant liberal. Moderate, progressive, reasonable.
And here I am with another
Democrat?
conservative bud.
And I'm sure we're going to have some Claymates here wondering, where is Clay? I believe it's 11 o'clock.
11 a.m., yes.
11 a.m., so he's going on The View. And he's just doing it to support his friend Meghan McCain, who just started as the official co-host of The View, the conservative voice there. So I think it's a good excuse this week, but we'll be holding to you. Clay, come back next week.
Yeah, definitely. And so if you don't like me, he will be back next week for sure.
Or Clay, you better be careful. She might just take over.
I doubt it. I have no Claymates or Jess mates.
I think on Twitter you got a big following.
Yes, I feel like they're
following.
like frenemies, like some nice trolls, some nasty trolls.
Nice trolls.
Yeah, I have
Nice
a good
trolls.
time. I can take
Interesting.
it. Yeah.
We need to do a segment on nice trolls.
Oh, nice trolls are the best trolls. They help you out so much. Like, they see if someone's being mean to you, then they go after them, like send you little tips. Anyway.
Interesting. Yeah. This is very interesting. Because on MSNBC, I don't have any nice trolls.
Oh, I'll
I
get
just
you
got
a couple
trolls.
nice
All right,
trolls.
please.
Everyone who I know from Fox who then goes on MSNBC is like, oh my God, I can't believe you deal with this all the time. I'm like, yeah.
She's bold. Jess is bold. And thank you for being bold and watching us here on Facebook. Don't forget to like our page. Also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. If you love Bold TV, share the show right now with your friends. Or if you just are really upset and you're passionate about something, make sure to share it with your friends too and keep the conversation going.
Definitely. We absolutely want to hear from you. So make sure to add your questions and comments during the show. We'll be checking them and hopefully get back to you.
And we have some very smart viewers that we love to integrate them into the show. So let's move on to headlines and just touch on a few things that happened this week. At Texas Tech University, Texas Tech Police Department officer Floyd East Jr. sadly was fatally shot, allegedly by a student whose parents told the university counseling center that he might be suicidal.
The student has since been apprehended. Our sympathies go out to the officer and his family.
And this is coming on the heels of the Las Vegas shooting, and many are continuing the debate around gun control issues. We touched on this last week. We had a conversation around gun control issues. So we want to keep that conversation going and make sure to put your comments and questions because we do want to continue that discussion. So please let us know your thoughts on this issue of guns and what sort of discussions we should have going on. So another big headline is President Trump's executive order to scale back parts of Obamacare. Jess, what was your reaction when you saw this?
It was very negative, though not surprising, since the GOP failed a couple times to actually get a bill done. I wasn't surprised that President Trump went to use his pen, as it were. Obviously, there are massive concerns around the millions that would lose insurance from this, and especially with the cost-sharing subsidies. I know that's something that's very exciting to the conservatives to get rid of them, but I have seen actually from a number of conservative representatives that, excuse me, they are concerned about how the 6 million enrollees who are covered by them are going to be able to afford their insurance and what they're going to get, and it could end up actually costing the government more in the end. So curious what you think about the sharing subsidy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but overall, I think it was a step in the right direction. But here's what I'm worried about. Like, I think President Trump is doing what he can without legislation.
Right.
So number one, the fact that this is executive order versus legislation is concerning because it could get rolled back again.
Yep.
But also number two, it's kind of like someone gave the analogy of like the European Union. It was like a failed experiment because it was like trying to be a little bit pregnant. Like you're either pregnant or you're not. And the EU, they didn't combine both the political and the economic control. It was an economic entity, but not a political entity. So it was kind of halfway there. And I feel like this is halfway there, but it's not. So it's going to be better, but I'm worried it could not get us where we need to go. And that's the thing about Obamacare is like Obamacare was a creep towards socialized medicine, but it wasn't all the way there. And it was positioned to, in my opinion, basically further the left's desire for socialized medicine. And so this is a push in the other direction, but it's not all the way there. But I do think it will drive down costs. I think that we're going to see more plans, more choice, more competition, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, we'll wait for the analyses on this. It's going to take a little while, and there was a lot of sidestepping there. Like, we're waiting for information from the Bureau of Labor, you know, the Department of Justice, et cetera, which is to be expected. It would be the same if any president had signed something like that. I wonder, though, about the Murray Alexander bill. So that was the bipartisan effort coming out of the Senate to get something done that would have some more free market fixes, but also improve upon Obamacare, which, you know, now majority of Americans would like to happen. They're a little concerned about what might happen if repeal and replace actually came to fruition. So I share your concern in the other direction, not the socialist direction, but the, like, you know, well-working Obamacare direction. So hopefully we'll get to reform soon. But again, I don't like it, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, well, the one thing that I'm hoping for is that we'll see more small business. So that's one of the provisions, is that small business owners can band together to create plans. Because right now, if you don't have a big company with a big
Right.
scale, you don't get the tax breaks that a bigger company gets to help subsidize healthcare. And so this executive order by Trump would help smaller businesses be able to band together and get some benefits to help improve the healthcare. So we have some policy wonks on later in the show. We can get their take on it. And let's talk a little bit about the Iran deal. Just reports that Trump says he won't certify the Iranian nuclear deal, but he also won't unravel it. So he's basically saying,
Nothing.
well, no, I think it's a step in the, well,
Your
you
steps
and I-
are never the steps that I like, but yeah.
No, I think it's a step in the right direction because, I mean, the whole deal itself, it just smelled so bad because it's just, first of all, I don't even think that President Trump or President Obama had the constitutional authority to do that. Like, you can't enter into a treaty without the Senate's approval. And then secondly, the Iranians are the largest bankrollers of terrorism. And this deal just basically gave them billions of cash to keep bankrolling Hezbollah.
Well, we returned billions of dollars of cash to them that was theirs in the first place. I think the real difficulty here is, and, you know, as I said, it was basically nothing. He has 1 foot out and 1 foot in. And I think that he had to do that because he had to hang tough with what he said, that the Iran deal was the worst deal, you know, in our history, and I'm going to get rid of it. But then he has Tillerson and Mattis and, you know, all of the generals, as it were, saying that they want to stay in the Iran deal and it's actually working as it should. So I think he's between a rock and a hard place there. There are also a number of other countries involved in this. This isn't just, you know, U.S. versus Iran. I totally take your point. I mean, as a Jewish person, you know, Iran does some pretty deplorable things. I mean, it's not just about America here. It's, you know, our allies, are our biggest ally in the Middle East, actually. They enjoy picking on, to put it mildly. So there are concerns there. I just, you know, I favor diplomacy over action. Obviously, we're going to talk about North Korea later on in the show. So again, like the healthcare, I'm not surprised. It isn't what I would do. And I think that having a united front within the cabinet would be a better look for the president at this point. I think with all the rumors flying around about who called who a moron and, you know, John Kelly having to come out yesterday and say, no, I'm not quitting today. I don't think I'm getting fired today. You know, this is an incredibly hard job. And, you know, they should be on the same page if they can be. And I get that everyone is supposed to bow to the president, but this is an incredibly difficult president, I think, to do that in the ways that it has happened in the past. So
Yeah. Well, hey, Kathleen Klein, watching from Seattle. Good morning. Kathleen says that he has grown-ups in the room saying keep the Iran deal, even if it's not perfect. Kathleen, come on.
They are the biggest
You don't-
grown-ups. Kathleen, I love you.
Kathleen, I love you too, but let's talk. Because, I mean, Trump, he knows how to...
To what? To tweet?
he knows how to, it's just... trigger. He knows how to trigger people and then do what he wants to do on a substantive
why
level.
is that?
I think it's like brilliant. I mean, he's a political, brilliant strategist.
Well, certainly, and that is a whole other episode at Lifetime we have to spend and analyzing how he hijacked the political system.
Let's talk about this theme in your book. So this is Jess's book. It's called America in the Age of Trump, Opportunities and Oppositions in an Unsettled World. So this is a perfect segue to your book.
Actually,
so tell us
totally
about your
accident.
book and why did you write it?
I wrote it with my now ex-boss. We ended on very good terms, though. Doug Schoen, who's also a Fox contributor. Long time, he was Bill Clinton's pollster, and we did all the polling work for Mike Bloomberg. So gun control and soda bans and education reform and all these things that the nanny state loves. So we wrote the book basically because of this conversation, that we felt that there was far too little of it, in fact, and that Democrats and Republicans were just talking past each other all the time. And there was actually so much more middle ground that we could agree upon if we actually just engaged in the conversation. So we take a number of issue areas, including the economy, criminal justice reform. We talk about values. We talk about things that conservatives have been thrilled about, like the value of marriage. Yeah, get married.
I'm waiting. I don't. Yes, please.
We will both get there one day.
Yes, we will.
And we talk about the American dream and who actually believes in it anymore. And we've seen, a seismic shift actually towards minorities believing in the American dream more than white Americans, which has been fascinating. We talk about, the national debt, like what happened to Simpson Bowles. We talk about entitlement reform, smart entitlement reform. We talk about improving upon Obamacare, not tossing it out and executive ordering our way to millions without insurance and higher rising premiums, which I believe is what will happen. Talk about national security. It was awesomely fun to write, and when we did write it, we assumed somebody else would be the occupant of the Oval Office, so we had some fast backtracking to do. Though I would say that this book is actually not partisan. Like, too many conservatives have liked it for me to feel that way, and Doug is a little bit more conservative than me anyway. But it's really a bipartisan roadmap to how Washington can start getting things done. And we use a lot of think tank research, which I think is really interesting.
Well, yeah, I think there's great think tank research that is not then translated into plain English.
Well, I don't know why they even bother
applicable.
asking them. Like, they waste everyone's time at Cato and Brookings and Heritage, and they get all these recommendations, and then nothing gets done. And the truth is, if you look at, I'm not talking about the extremes. The extremes are never going to work. But if you look at the kind of center-right and the center-left think tanks, more often than not, they're having a similar conversation where you can pick bits and pieces out of it and cobble together something really useful policy-wise.
Sure. So, Jess, commenter Nora Bustani-Jost, hey Nora, she says, this is a very bold statement, the American dream is dead. What would you say to Nora?
I would say that if Nora is a millennial, and I'm guessing
is?
that she
Yes.
is, that you are not alone in thinking that. And the research overwhelmingly shows that about millennials, that we just have a different perspective on our chances of getting ahead than previous generations, that majorities of us don't feel like we'll do better than our parents. And we're the first generation in history to feel that way. We also are the biggest entrepreneurial generation with women leading the way there, very bold. And there's a lot of upside to that. I think it's an unfortunate state of affairs that people feel that way, and I personally don't agree. I think that we really just need to kind of change the goalposts, as it were. Like, you're not going to have a white picket fence by 30 years old and, a couple of kids, but you probably don't want them anyway at this point.
So would you say that the American dream maybe is changing? It's
I
not
think it's
dead.
evolving. I think our generation, I think Gen Z is going to make it even more pronounced. How different American life is now than for Gen X and really for baby boomers, for our parents.
Do you think also part of why kind of the definition of what is success is changing? It's in part because millennials want different things than our parents. So the view of what should be the American dream, that picket fence, most millennials aren't wanting that. So it's more kind of like we're victims of our own success. So like we're doing what we want to do, so therefore our vision of what we want to do is different than our parents.
It is, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a decided shift away from valuing monetary success to value and purpose-driven success. I mean, we talk about this a lot, right? I mean, amongst our
valuing
friends.
experiences.
Exactly. As a generation, some research actually that I was doing for Bustle, where I work, about how millennials think about success. I mean, over 50% of our readers see health as a sign of success, and they want to lead a healthy life, which is mind, body, and soul. That's something that's completely new for millennials, and they value experiences over money, which is also, I mean, you need the money to have the experiences a lot of the time.
But like possessions.
Exactly.
Like
I don't,
a car or a house or
right.
a fancy house.
You want to get by, obviously, but
we're
as
more
I said,
likely
the
to own a
goalpost,
passport. Like we travel
which
more.
I
so,
love. Yeah, I mean, globalism. I'm into it. So.
Well, you and Trump should have a talk.
Yeah, I have many talks with him through the television. He's not a fan of mine.
Well, I'm a fan of you. Even if we disagree on policy,
It's so
I'm a
polite,
big
though.
fan of you.
Yeah,
So
big fan.
make sure that you all check it out. America in the Age of Trump, Opportunities and Oppositions in an Unsettled World. So let's move on. And we'd like to welcome our panel. Joining us is Akash Chougule, the Director of Policy at Americans for Prosperity, a conservative grassroots organization, which, in full disclosure, I mentioned earlier on the show that I'm running Generation Opportunity, which is one of their campaigns. So we're glad to have Akash here.
We also have Ronnie with us. He's a former New York City Council candidate, and he was also the Associate Director of Public Engagement in the Obama administration.
So welcome to you both, Ronnie and Akash. Great to have you
morning.
on both.
Good morning.
for
Thank you for
having
having us.
Yeah.
So we want to delve into a conversation around the Asian American experience in politics. But first, I want to talk more, just let our viewers know more about your backgrounds. Why don't we start with you, Akash? How did you get into public service, and what are you working on right now?
Yeah, so I think it's actually a perfect segue from the conversation you were just having about the American
Our
dream.
gift for you.
Thank you. Teed it up perfectly. I think that's the number one reason why I went into politics is, like Ronnie, my parents are also immigrants. Excuse me, my dad came from India when he was right about my age, his mid-20s. Came here with $26 in his pocket, bought a 90-day bus pass, and traveled around the country. Got his first job on the 89th day of his bus pass, and just started from nothing and built his American dream. So he's very, very proud of America. Very, not really political actually, but just tremendously patriotic and so on. And then obviously built a nice life for us. And I think I've been able to connect what made that possible. Right, was sort of these intrinsic qualities about America. What policies foster that at the local, state, and federal level. Americans for Prosperity, like Carrie said, is a grassroots organization that really executes the ideas that I believe in to foster the American dream. And so the things that I'm focusing on now, I do a lot of healthcare, tax, education, and labor policy. Sort of kitchen table issues is what we focus on, pocketbook issues that affect people every day.
And Akash, what do you think about we were just talking about the executive order on healthcare. Do you think it'll make a difference in terms of driving down cost? I know that's what President Trump is hoping.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are definitely steps in the right direction to make affordable insurance legal again, essentially, to make it accessible and available for people. I think they are short-term fixes, as we saw with the last administration. Anything that's done through executive order is as impermanent as the next election. So Congress acting on health care reform remains a priority, but I think it's a good step in the right direction.
We should get a hat, make affordable health insurance legal again.
If it fits.
It's too much for a hat, so we'll ignore it.
And Ronnie, let's hear your story. How did you come to public service?
Sure. So, we were just talking about similar backgrounds. My parents came here from South Korea, and very little coming to this country. We lived in a car off and on the first year of my life, and within one generation, because it had great schools, good neighborhoods, place to live and thrive. Within one generation, you can come from where I come from, and work at the elbow of the President of the United States. And it's an amazing country, and only in this country where a story like mine is even possible. And it's something that my old boss, President Obama, talked quite a bit about. And your conversation as we were listening into it about the American dream being dead, I think is incredibly cynical. I think and you guys talked a little bit about this, the American dream as it was, as a boomer construct, that might be dead. It is not dead in that if you come to this country, you work hard, you play by the rules, that there's an opportunity for you, is alive and well. And I think it is being reinvented and reimagined by millennials, because we have to. We've been dealt this really, really difficult hand economically, environmentally, socially. You see what's going on in this country. We have to take hold of what's the country's going to be and what it wants to be, and that has to be driven by a new definition of what the American dream is that I think, again, is alive and well, and I think this generation will take the baton that's being passed to them and make this country as good as it's ever been through opportunity, through equality and justice and fairness, and in a way that what the president has put forth in his healthcare executive order simply does not do. Making healthcare more difficult for poor people does not make America great. By making it more difficult for the least among us to get healthcare and services does not make us better. And I think across the board, if you want to talk about millennials in politics, resoundingly reject the agenda that President Trump has put forth.
Can I quickly, I'm going a little off script, but just as you both come from immigrant families, if you could just touch on really quickly the current state of immigration reform in this country, which I find frightening, to say the least, and talking about how we are a country built for opportunity, right, and social mobility and things like that, and what the effects of essentially closing our borders, wall, no wall, but even, making it more difficult to go through the legal processes to get here, what the effect will be on America and the American dream going forward.
Well, I think there's no doubt we need reform. There needs to be reforms in our immigration system, but making it harder for hardworking people from around the world to come to this country in the way that your father did and with my parents and millions of other families have, does not make us great, does not live up to our values as Americans. Bans based on religion, based on regions, based on essentially what is, I think, racist assumptions that people have, does not live up to our American values as a place where you can come and pursue big dreams and do big things in this country that'll change the world. It doesn't make us easy, doesn't make us better.
Yeah, I think it's actually sort of it's an interesting opportunity, much more so than I think people would have guessed on Election Day. President Trump obviously doesn't really have strong ideological convictions one way or another. And what we're seeing is, even vast majorities of Republicans want a solution on Dreamers and so on. I think immigration reform starts with something that is driven by market forces, our market demands, what we need in our economy to fill jobs and so on in a 21st century economy. I think there was a big disconnect, obviously, between what the media was talking about and portraying versus what the American people were concerned about, which is illegal immigration, border security. And so he talks a lot about making all these great deals, and we sort of laugh it off a lot of the time. But it's interesting that the one issue where he took the hardest line on the campaign trail seems like it's presenting an opportunity for something that sort of is a solution for Dreamers, has border security in it. And so that's what I'm looking forward to, hopefully having a constructive conversation in Congress there. Because I think it really is an opportunity for him to score a win that's actually a win for the country and the American people, as well as, for him, that he wants to sign something that people like.
Constructive conversation. Here's hoping. So we did want to also touch on just Asian Americans in politics here in this country. And Ronnie, I know you just ran for city council. What was that experience like for you here in New York? Did you have any particular policy, questions coming from the Asian American community? What just overall was that experience like for you?
It was a tremendous experience. Unfortunately, we fell short, but it was worth the effort to step into the arena. I think more millennials need to. If we want to change the way government works, and I believe that government can and should be a force of good in people's lives, it should not make things harder for people, then it needs to be full of people who care about the country, care about making it better, regardless of where your ideologies are. And for me, it was an amazing opportunity for me, who've been as an operative, been at the White House, been campaign staff, to see what it's like to have your name on T-shirts and signs and on websites. It's very surreal.
For you to be the hope and change.
To me, be the hope and change. I think what I discovered throughout the process was how Asian Americans are not represented in government. People don't like us, don't look like us, aren't in government, aren't in politics in the way that I think we ought to be. In New York City in particular, there are more Asian people who are homeless than any other population in the city, and I think that would be a surprising statistic for many.
Totally surprising.
I had no
Lifelong
idea.
New Yorker.
And
Wow.
it's something we just don't talk about, and we can't make the change that we seek unless we have more people that understand what it means to be an immigrant family, an entrepreneur. I think when we think about immigration reform, I think immediately people think about the border, U.S. and Mexico, but we don't think about the other immigrants from across the country or across the world that come to this country.
Yeah, I mean,
many of which come
most
from
illegal
South
entrants now are overstaying their visa.
40%, I think,
yeah.
our visa overstays.
Yeah. So, Akash, let's get your experience. Especially as a conservative Asian American, the odds are definitely not in your favor. Just looking at party affiliation voting, it tends to be 3-1, maybe 2-1. What's that been like for you?
Yeah, it's actually far more than 3-1. So you're underselling it. But yeah, as a young Asian American person from the Northeast, there are just not very many people like me running around at CPAC or these conservative events. And I think part of it actually goes to, Asian Americans have overwhelmingly done very well in this country, right? They've been entrepreneurial, they're low levels of government dependence, they're, doing well, they have strong families. And so I don't know if I want to use the word content, but it doesn't seem like politics needs to be an immediate priority for a lot of Asian American families. Indian Americans in particular, they're running businesses, they have, their kids are doing well, et cetera. But that complacency is something that is frustrating to me, right? That the right has sort of alienated them through rhetoric and, demographics and who they're sort of reaching out and appealing to. I think it goes both ways, where both sides sort of take a sect of voters for granted. On the right, I think we have a challenge where there are policy solutions that work for Asian Americans, Indian Americans, for any demographic group, right? I sort of reject this concept of identity politics in that there are Asian American issues, right? I think a lot of different issues affect Asian Americans.
Yeah.
And the first challenge is not only presenting them in a way that doesn't alienate people, but actually showing up in the first place, right? Like, go to the Diwali festival, or go to like the, whatever Indian American festival there is in your community if you're running for office. Even if you think you're going to lose 8-2 or 9-1 on election day, the first step is presenting yourself. That's something our side hasn't done in a long time, and has actually moved in the opposite direction. And so that's something that I'm really, anxious to begin to change.
Cool. Well, we're both so excited to have both very bold men here at this table.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
thank you much for joining us. Hope you can come back.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks for having us.
So much. Speaking, perfect segue again. Our next guest is an
Today is
Asian
just
American
working.
congressman. He's hopefully our guests can stick around and maybe they can get to know him.
I'm sure Ronnie already knows him.
Yeah. So it's
so.
and then also it's our segment with Change.org. As you might know, and I hope you do, that Change.org is the world's largest petition platform and hub for civic organizing. Its mission is to empower individuals everywhere to create the change they want to see in the world. We have several petitions that are going to guide our conversation today.
So let's welcome our guest, Congressman Ted Lieu, Democratic Congressman from California's 33rd District. Hello, Congressman.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a massive fan. Your tweets make me smile constantly.
Oh, thank you.
So, Congressman, great to have you. Our first petition we're looking at from Change.org is calling for a diplomatic solution with North Korea.
Congressman, can you tell us about your recent legislation on this issue?
Of course. I served on active duty in the U.S. Air Force, and at the time I was under U.S. Pacific Air Forces in Guam. We did a whole series of military exercises, most of them directed against North Korea, and there are exactly zero good military options.
Yeah.
Every scenario could lead to a catastrophic result, including up to 2.1 million people dead, 7.7 million people injured, including hundreds of thousands of Americans. And that's why I support using every option except the military option. We need to try diplomacy, we need to try economic sanctions. And if we're gonna go down the path to war, the American people need to know we've exhausted every other option. That's why this petition is so fantastic, and I urge people to sign it.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you're very vocal on this issue, and we hear about it a lot in the headlines, and we see a lot of Nikki Haley and Rex Tillerson on the subject. How do you feel things are going? I mean, not in a partisan way, though. I mean, I guess partisanship does always get in the way of these things. But do you feel like we're on the brink of something catastrophic here? I mean, I understand why you introduced the legislation, but where do you think we really stand?
I think the Trump administration has been totally dysfunctional on the North Korea issue. You have Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, or Defense Secretary, talking about diplomacy with North Korea. And then you've got the president going on Twitter and publicly undercutting diplomacy, undercutting his own Secretary of State. And that causes a number of problems. One is it's confusing to Americans and to world leaders. And second, it makes it so that Rex Tillerson has a hard time doing his job now. When he goes and talks to world leaders, they don't know who he is speaking for. And it is so dysfunctional that if you were to ask a very simple and basic and important question right now, does the U.S. support diplomacy in North Korea? The answer from the Trump administration would be, we don't know. And that
Congressman, can I ask you though about President Trump's strategy, because he's in an unprecedented way been able to get the Chinese to the table to act. I mean, the Chinese are essentially bankrolling the North Korean economy, bankrolling the North Korean nuclear program. And what President Trump has successfully done is said to the Chinese, we're not going to let you do that anymore. And they finally, in an unprecedented way that no either Republican or Democratic president had done before, been able to get the Chinese to cooperate and say, we will sanction business flowing from North Korea. So yes, the president uses a lot of bluster, but isn't this toward a good end?
I commend the administration's actions on economic sanctions, and keep in mind that was done with Congress. So I voted for and supported the strongest economic sanctions leveled at North Korea ever. we need to give some time for those sanctions to work, which is why it's really bizarre and not helpful for the president to keep threatening war with North Korea. He needs to let these sanctions work. We need to try diplomacy. And if we're going to go down this dark and bloody path of war, the American people need to know we've tried everything first.
Sure, that's fair. I think people all agree we want to prevent war. Congressman, we also want to move to the issue of climate change. We know you've been very vocal on that. This next petition calls on President Trump to act on climate change, and the petition has more than 150,000 signatures. So with the news this week, we saw President Trump scaling back President Obama's clean energy regulations. What's your feelings on this?
I think it's a terrible idea to roll back the Clean Power Plan. One of the reasons they're saying that they want to do this is they want to bring coal back. Well, here's a news flash. Coal is not coming back.
Yeah.
And it's not coming back for the same reason 35 millimeter film is not coming back. A new technology came in and displaced it. It has nothing to do with governmental regulations. What happened is new technology and the discovery of vast amounts of natural gas in the United States started to wipe out coal. That's not going to change. What you're going to do by rolling back a Clean Power Plan is simply jack up greenhouse emissions and not bring back a single coal worker's job. My view is we need to invest in these coal communities, retrain them to jobs that industry actually needs, help their children, but stop lying to them.
Congressman, we actually have seen some coal jobs coming back. With the scale back of some of these regulations. The Wall Street Journal has been reporting actually extensively on jobs that are coming back. And I do agree with you, we do need to be moving to cleaner sources, but at the same time, you can't just pull the rug out from someone. We saw this in Europe, like the Germans, for example, they tried to move too far too fast, and it ended up hurting the poor and middle classes the most because they spend the biggest part of their household budget on energy. So aren't you worried about finding that middle ground?
In terms of coal jobs, studies show that Arby's employs more people than the entire coal industry does. So we're talking about a very small amount of jobs. And again, coal's not going to come back because vast new technology and cleaner, cheaper sources of energy have displaced it. Now, I do agree that we need to be careful in how we go forward, but rolling back a Clean Power Plan is not a good idea. And again, I support the petition, and hopefully more and more people sign on to it.
Yeah, Congressman, I agree with you completely here. And you touched on something that I think is incredibly important when you mentioned that the administration needs to stop lying to the American people. You are very vocal on Twitter, and I believe use your Twitter feed as a transparency and honesty check for what's going on there, raising issues over and over again, especially, about I'm trying to find the right polite word here, but the way that President Trump's family is involved in political affairs in an inappropriate way. So on that note, we are aware of the fact that you have been blocked on Twitter by Ivanka Trump. That's right?
That is correct.
Yeah, well,
And,
congrats to you.
Well, we can work it out. But there is a petition on change.org calling to prohibit President Trump from blocking U.S. citizens on Twitter. Could you tell us your thoughts on the President, First Lady, and First Daughter blocking people on social media?
Sure. So just so you know, I don't block anyone on Twitter. I think it is a really stupid use of energy to try to do that. I find it rather bizarre that the president is spending his time trying to block people on Twitter. And my view is we should have a free and open marketplace of ideas. Sometimes I get very bizarre tweets and reply to what I do. Sometimes I get some very interesting ones, and I learn from reading some of the replies to my tweets. My view of the president is he shouldn't be blocking anybody. And I don't believe any senior White House official should be blocking members of Congress. If you can't stand a 140-character tweet directed at you, then maybe you shouldn't be in the White House.
Yeah. Do you know why she blocked you, what you had tweeted?
Actually, I have no idea because my tweets towards Ivanka Trump were pretty tame. It was mostly, I think, my tweets against her father. That's actually why I think she blocked me.
So, and is the concern that this is blocking the right of citizens to petition their government, which is a constitutional right?
If you're going to be a senior advisor in the White House, your goal is to try to work with members of Congress and not to stop communications from them. And then let's just take a step back. Why does Jared Kushner and Ivanka even have security clearances?
Yeah.
We know that Jared Kushner lied multiple times on the security clearance forms. We know from additional reporting from Newsweek that in his financial disclosure forms, he failed to disclose a company he invested in, and then he enriched himself from that because he didn't disclose it. And then we know that with Ivanka, she also had some of the same mistakes on her forms. So I'm not even sure why they are in the White House and why they have security clearance forms.
Well, but I mean, Congressman, you can certainly, and I think we should definitely make sure to hold people accountable for their disclosure forms. But at the same time, in terms of family members, I mean, JFK and the Kennedy family and Robert Kennedy, you had a legacy there, and Samuel Adams and the Adams family. Like, it's as old as America itself that families have been involved in political life. So
Not at
I
this
don't know
level,
why.
though. I mean, it is so
I mean,
unclear what their positions and their roles are. I mean, during the transition, and maybe you weren't as horrified by it as many of us, and I mean, the congressman might have been, but to see Ivanka Trump sitting in that meeting with Prime Minister Abe, which was the first visit to Trump Tower that happened during the transition, but no business being there. That's just your sidekick. I mean, she had the policy positions actually that she and Jared espoused that they were going to be supporting. We've seen no evidence of her working towards, a climate change agenda that's good for the world. Women's rights is a complete stall here.
But
So
Bill
I agree
Clinton-
completely with
Bill
the
Clinton let his wife run the healthcare policy portfolio. I'm not sure what her qualifications were besides being the president's wife. So
Well, I think
similar
Hillary Clinton
things.
had a lot more qualifications, certainly than Jared Kushner, to fix the Middle East, which is just, anyway. So Congressman, sorry, little sidebar there. You've also introduced a bill asking for President Trump to refund his travel costs, and we'll have a petition on this as well. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I don't have any problem with the president taking vacations. What I have a problem with is when he specifically goes and picks locations that he or his family owns,
Right.
whether it's for a conference or for weekend golfing. He comes with this huge entourage of people, security detail, his staff, and other folks, and they are paying lodging at the Trump Organization property. They're paying for food and drinks. Those are all taxpayer funds. So every time the president does this, he's enriching himself based on taxpayer funds. That is a violation of the Money Limits Clause in the Constitution. It's a violation of ethics. And my bill, which is called the Swamp Act,
Yeah.
it says
Clever
it's
branding.
basically
I'll give you that.
Yeah, and there's also the concern that now we don't have Mar-a-Lago logs, right, of who is there, and there was a big piece, I think it was USA Today, about how many lobbyists were golfing there and that people are getting access to the president and his entourage in unusual ways. So thank you very much for the Swamp Act. I hope it gains a lot of support, and thank you for joining us this morning.
All right, a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
Congressman, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And so let's move on to our Ben Franklin Circle segment. This is a nationwide initiative led by the 92nd Street Y, the Hoover Institution, and Citizen University. It's based on Ben Franklin's own mutual improvement club, where he and his peers discussed what it means to be a good person.
Today, we're focusing on the virtue of temperance. What did Benjamin Franklin say about temperance? Quote, "Eat not to dullness and drink not to elevation."
So to help us expand on this topic, we are joined today by Rachel Williamson. She's the managing editor of Spoon University. Spoon U is a food website for millennials, and they are on a mission to make food make more sense. Welcome, Rachel.
Hello.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Good, we're good. A little hungry.
Yeah.
And so we know that Spoon U is hosting an event this weekend in Brooklyn tomorrow.
Yes.
It's called Brain Food, and we have a quick clip about it. Let's take a look. Wow, I'm now even, you made me even hungrier.
We should watch it again.
Yeah, I mean, it looks amazing. So, and our Team Bold will be at Brain Food tomorrow. So make sure to check out our Snapchat. You can find our Snap code address on our Twitter page, and make sure to get your tickets. And if you use the promo code BOLD20, so go BOLD20, you get 20% off on entry for all our fans, Bold viewers who are going to be in Brooklyn tomorrow.
Yeah, look great. Video. I work at Bustle. We're big fans. It was,
Oh, amazing.
yeah, it's pretty fabulous. Carrie actually originally introduced me to the Bustle folks.
Really? That's
Great.
great.
Yeah.
Matchmaker.
Yeah, totally.
My roommate works at Bustle. She's
really?
the best. Yes.
Who's your roommate?
Alison Povarsky.
Oh, I have seen her email address. I work on a different floor than her. It's like worlds away. Anyway, but you would like to talk about your job.
Yes.
So, what tips do you have for millennials to find temperance in their lives?
You know, I think that word, like, it's like, oh, temperance, like, what does that mean when you're
such
a
a big
millennial?
word.
Yeah, it's like kind of a scary word. But I think it's just, I mean, my biggest tip is one, like, mindful eating, and then figuring out how to eat more fruits and vegetables. And mindful eating, all that is just being more aware of, like, what you're putting in your body. And I think college students, you know, get a really bad rap of like they only want junk food and they don't eat well, but I think we're finding that people actually really do care about what they're putting in their bodies and how it makes them feel. And so you just have to pay more attention.
I think that's totally true. And I remember I graduated in '06, so older than you, but
Grandma millennial. You and me both.
Hillary millennial, as I like to call it.
Okay, not that one.
Whatever. But I totally agree with you. And I grew up in New York City where people are very mindful of their diet and exercise is a big priority. But on college campuses, it was portion control more than it was anything else because you had a salad bar, right? So I was at the salad bar all the time.
You can get whatever you want.
So much dressing too. You know, you can keep going back for more. So I
Fried
mean,
chicken
oh my
on
God, so-
top.
the crumble was my
Oh,
favorite thing, but I'd like
everything, yes.
scrape the top off.
And that's not temperate if you're getting this massive portion size.
I was
think
eating
in America
to
we have a
elevation.
problem.
We have a huge portion problem. Could you talk about the portion problem?
Portion problem. Yeah, I think that's true. And, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, like, you know, there's like binge eating, and then there's also like, oh, I'm gonna eat because it makes me feel better, and you eat like too much Ben and Jerry's. But I think it's just about like getting creative and also like kind of owning your relationship with food. And it can actually be like a healthy relationship, and it doesn't have to be like a diet. It can just be figuring out like what foods actually make you feel good. And when you figure out, you know, you don't need to like pile your plate with like ranch dressing, but you can like figure out different flavor combinations, or you can make a Greek salad out of dining hall food. It's fun and it feels good, and like you have more control.
Well, so Ben Franklin said drink not to elevation. So on the drinking issue, I know that's a big problem, especially with Greek life and rushing and college campus, you know, spring break and all this. What do you see? Because you guys work with a ton of college campuses. Like, what are the best practices to incorporate temperance when it comes to drinking?
I think when it comes to drinking is kind of like what I said with food, is like figuring out like what your relationship to like alcohol is, or to partying. And I think it's really interesting. We, you know, get a lot of students who are encountering their relationship with partying for the first time. And, you know, we've all been there where we've drinking too much and it doesn't feel good. But, you know, I think you should have fun. Like, we should all have fun. And,
Right.
you know, we don't support underage drinking, obviously. But it's figuring out what, like I said, what makes you feel good in a way that's not to excess. And, you know, you might actually find out like, hey, like, maybe this wine actually does taste good. I don't have to like slap the bag, even though that's fun sometimes. Like, you can start figuring out what you actually do like.
Do you think, in terms of college campuses, and actually, I mean, throughout life, peer pressure is a really big part of what goes on in the partying scene, certainly. Just have another.
And also that you're boring if you're not drunk.
Right,
Or if you're
which-
not drinking too much, then you're boring.
I was actually so much more sober as a younger person than I am. I
Yeah.
don't have a drinking problem. I'm not just saying that.
She's a lush.
No.
She's got some booze in this cup.
Water.
No, but
called booze.
I used to be. I have a very low tolerance, especially for someone my height. It's like very odd.
Yeah.
I'm sitting, but I'm almost 6 feet tall. And I used to like one drink, and I was drunk when I was younger. And now I can have like 2 or 3, and I mean, it gets this over a longer period of time. But you know, could you speak a little bit to the peer pressure issue in terms of, you know, keeping yourself under control, but also keeping yourself healthy?
Yeah. For me, I like actually didn't drink the first like year and a half, if not 2 years of college. And it was like definitely a thing. And
You were not an underage drinker.
I wasn't an underage drinker.
It's possible, folks.
Look at this law-abiding citizen.
Oh, yes, most of the time. And, but I think I encourage you, like, do what makes you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable drinking, you don't need to do it. And like, you can also do it when you want. I think the biggest thing is like people have to be like, oh, like, yeah, I'm going to party all the time, or like, oh, I'm not going to drink at all. Like, there is a middle ground, and you should just feel like you can have that control. Also, with peer pressure, like, you know, find your friends who support you no matter how you're feeling that day. And I think that was like my friends, sure, they like made fun of me sometimes if like I didn't drink, but also you can still party and not drink, and it's fun, and you're not hungover the next day.
Yeah, well, you said the middle ground, like the
Yeah.
extreme of being totally drunk or not drinking anything. Like there is definitely a middle ground. I mean, I come from a Mormon background, and I went to Mormon college, Brigham Young, where they're stone cold sober, #1 ranking all the time. So there's no temperance when it comes to alcohol at BYU. But I think sometimes people perceive people who don't drink as being a little snobby or being uptight. And I would always feel like, you know what? Well, I don't need a substance to have a good time. It's not my crutch. I'm just naturally happy.
I mean, I think if you ever go through a period where there's a lot of people drinking around you and you don't drink, you get a lot more confident in yourself and to like make your decisions. And it's also a skill that you can have, that if you go to a work event, like you don't have to be drinking to be able to talk to people. But I think when you're in college, like you might not know that, and you're still figuring it out for yourself. And
Sure.
I think
and I have a wine rec, and I buy wine for people. I'm definitely pro people drinking. I just don't drink myself. So.
totally. And like we have a lot of people in our office that don't drink, and it doesn't have to be a thing. It doesn't have to be weird.
I think it's much less of a thing
Yeah.
now than even like when I was in my early 20s. Just the like, yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, because it used to be that a date was automatically,
Right.
let's go for drinks. But there's so many more coffee dates, and there's so many more exercise dates and things that are so
and I think
healthy.
yeah, and with younger people, you know, we hear our like students who write content bring up like, you know, the dating culture
Right.
of like you'll just get drunk at a party and then like, you know, you'll hook up, whatever, but there's so much more. And like food can be like a place where you can connect with people, and maybe you go on a coffee date, or maybe like you try to make sushi and like fail and it's fun. But that's definitely
And then you know you can be together forever.
yeah.
Yes. Aw. No, it's more meaningful rather than just, you know, drinking, as Ben Franklin would say, to elevation, blacking out and not remembering anything.
Yeah, I mean there's
So it's more meaningful. You have an actual
you can
relationship.
definitely my advice to like the young people watching, you can definitely figure it out and definitely figure out that
Yeah,
balance.
like you can have a cocktail. It does make
Yeah.
like the chat easier. You're on, you know,
sometimes, yeah.
kind of stalled first date.
Yeah. No, I get it. I used to drink and then I stopped, but yeah.
I actually totally thought you drank. I feel like
I
now I've
used
hung out
to.
with you a bunch, and I thought you were drinking, and you weren't.
That's the best.
Just that fun.
So in terms of just, you know, this value of temperance, do you guys think about it like when you're because my thing, if I worked at Spoon U, I feel like I would just be like corpulent. Like I just don't like, because you guys have so many like access to amazing, you know, chefs and food. Like, how do you find temperance in your life when you're working at a Food Network?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, it's funny because in college I was like, you know, always thinking about food and like was really hungry and like, oh, but like I wanted to be thin and like, how did I find that balance? But when I started, you know, looking at food every day and like donuts and pizza and all this beautiful, really good food, I realized, at least in a work setting, I needed food for sustenance. I needed food to feel good. And if I wasn't feeling my body right, then I wouldn't be able to work. And so for me, it was like, find things that made me feel good. And so when we're making giant Twix, I don't eat the whole thing. Now, like, I still do. We call it the Spoon 10 instead of Freshman 15. When we first joined, like, all right, there's a lot of stuff we make that's really good. And, like, that food definitely doesn't get thrown out. Like, we eat it. So there is a balance, but I think it's really figuring, like, I realized my relationship with food is like, I needed to eat protein and some greens or I'm going to feel like horrible and can't work.
What about, I want to ask you about this concept of food porn. Like, do you
Yeah.
think we can apply temperance to how we present food? Because I feel like it becomes a status symbol where you have to say, I'm eating at the best restaurants, I've got the best picture. Like, it becomes this thing
My
where I feel
vegetable
like,
garden is better than your vegetable
yes,
garden.
yes.
I have
So-
no vegetable garden.
That's awesome. Yeah, and actually at our event tomorrow, Alton Brown, he is speaking and he's talking about the future of food media. And I think he's going to kind of touch on this of like, we're right now, all food media is, you know, food porn and hands and pans videos and just like really gluttonous.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is like when you become friends with people who are those influencers and whatever, you realize that, you know, there is definitely sometimes that people don't eat the food that they take pictures of, because you can't like be fit and healthy and be eating, you know, donut tacos every day. I don't know if that's a thing, but we should make it a thing.
I'm sure it's a thing.
And you have to find that
not-
balance
it's
for
not even
yourself.
authentic.
It's not always authentic, and I think that's like the real challenge, because I know the stuff that I take pictures of that's really gluttonous, I definitely eat it. And me and my friends who are in the food space, we talk about like, okay, what is the happy medium? Can we have food porn that's also good for you? Or like, what is our relationship with food if we're just staring at food all day? Like, are we learning how to cook? Things like that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So interesting. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. Rachel Williamson with Spoon U.
And everyone go to Brooklyn tomorrow.
Yes, everyone be there. It's gonna be a blast.
Yes. Don't forget, Brain Food. Use the promo code BOLD20 for 20% off your tickets. Thank you so much. Great to have you. So this has been a great Ben Franklin Circle. We've been doing this on an ongoing, reoccurring segment here, and you can start your own Ben Franklin Circle. We challenge you at home to be bold and start one. Get a group of your friends and pick one of the virtues to discuss.
Let us know what you guys talked about. Send us photos on Bold's Facebook page.
And we would love to hear from you so we can include you into a future episode. Get all the info you need at benfranklincircles.org or email benfranklincircles@gmail.com to sign up and let them know you saw the segment on Bold TV.
Now, let's get to our regular Bookstr segment. Bookstr is an online community of book lovers. We have the co-founder of Bookstr, Sarah Hill, with us. Welcome, Sarah. Hi again. We talked about my book a few weeks ago. It's really fun.
And we also have Heather Cabot, the co-author of Geek, Girl Rising, Inside the Sisterhood, Shaking Up Tech. We have a background video on that. Let's take a look. Excellent. Geek Girl Rising. Welcome, Geek Girl Rising.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's so fun to be here.
Yeah.
Great to have you. So tell us, why did you write the book? And you co-authored it.
Yes, my co-author is Samantha Walravens, who lives out in San Francisco. Sam and I both have children. I have twins, boy-girl twins, and she has 4 kids, 2 girls and 2 boys. And really, I think in many ways, we were both inspired to delve into this topic because of our children, because all of our kids are interested in tech, our daughters especially. Our kids are all around the same age, and we were concerned about what we were reading in the news, and this is actually even prior to all of the revelations that we've seen, you know, over this last year. But we were concerned because we have kids that are you know, tech is a huge part of their lives. They are interested in how it works, and we were concerned about what we were seeing, not only in terms of the sexism in the industry, but the fact that you know, the number of women going into this field has been going down, and the number of women graduating with degrees in computer science and engineering has been on a decline. It actually is starting to go up again, which is fantastic with all of this in the news. But so that was really one of our, I would say, our joint inspirations on two different coasts.
Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly important, and I love the, you know, the Goldie Blox story about the creation of that toy. And this is something we talk a lot about at work. And I did a PhD in quantitative political science, and there were not many gals hanging out there doing their regression analyses. And this was in Europe, so it's different. But I commend you. I think it's fantastic that you wrote it. What's the reception been like? And you know, must be excited about the TV series. And
You know, I think people are, it's been overwhelming. I mean, the reception has been, I mean, I've had just people come up to me and say that they've been so inspired by it. Even people who read early drafts of it said they felt like it was almost like a manifesto. And for us, it was really about, we just wanted to share these stories. We had attended the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing, which is the largest gathering of women in tech in the world. And we had attended that for early in our reporting. And we were struck by one of the panels where Chelsea Clinton was speaking, and she talked about this visibility gap in tech, that we just don't see these stories of these women. And that was really the goal for us, not only for our daughters, but for everyone, is to shine a light on these women who are really doing amazing things and forging ahead in the face of this entrenched sexism in the system.
What do you think accounts for the decline of women going into technology fields?
Well, it's very nuanced. I mean, there are a lot of different theories on that. I certainly, one of the biggest things is the way computers were marketed in the early days. They were very much marketed to men, and when you think about video games as well, and also, in the media, the way women really haven't been portrayed as builders or engineers or inventors, and that's why that's why we start the book off with Goldilocks, because what Debbie Sterling was trying to do was to really change the narrative. And in fact, last week she spoke at Grace Hopper. She keynoted there, and one of the things she said was she wants the word engineer to be in every girl's vocabulary.
Yeah.
And I love that, and I believe that. And again, that the passion for the book really comes from that idea that we need to be able to see ourselves in these roles.
Yeah, even like Legos didn't have little female Lego people until recently, right?
Well,
So-
interestingly, in the 70s, I'm old. When I was growing up in the 70s, during the Free to Be You and Me years, and by the way, I had the chance to actually give Marlo Thomas a galley, which was like,
Oh my
I was like,
God.
oh my God, totally starstruck. But in those years, in the 70s, when I was growing up, the gender roles were not as pronounced. We really didn't start to see this sort of pink aisle and blue aisle. Toy aisles until the 80s. In fact, if you there's a great Lego ad from I think like 1973 or something like that has a girl building with Legos in her overalls, and that's Goldilocks that we see today. That went away, and so there's sort of this confluence of things happening. In fact, in the 80s, in the late 80s, a third of the people working in computer programming were women. And it's just continued to go down. And as I said, in the book, we kind of get into all of the different reasons for that. But it's troubling when you think about the fact that tech is such a huge part of our lives.
especially modern tech.
And what do you think about this? One theory that I've heard about why fewer women go into STEM careers is because they actually are more multi-talented when you look at their test scores. So women tend to score better on average than men in verbal skills, but they're more well-rounded. So because they have that strength in verbal areas, they actually can go into verbal things more than men because they have this innate ability to do things better in a verbal way. So and so I've heard that argument to say this is part of why women don't do it as much, because they are so good at communicating. And in our knowledge-based economy, the communication is growing more and more important.
But the thing is, you need to have communication skills to be an innovator and to be a problem solver. And I think that in terms of the research that I've looked at, a lot of the reasons why women are not going in is because they're discouraged. And it's hard to be the only one in your class. And it's hard to be, we talk in the book about the fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, and the fact that women are often conditioned to have a fixed mindset, which is that you're only born with a certain amount of innate potential, whereas a growth mindset tends to be that, I can learn how to do this, I can master this, and that I think really goes directly to this question. So yes, I do think that women certainly gravitate to certain areas, but I wonder. I will tell you something. For myself, I'm being really honest here. I am a kid who had math anxiety. I definitely gravitated to writing and reading, right? Yeah. And I will tell you something really funny. When the book came out, and there's a whole chapter that we did on investors, and my mom actually said, I'm really proud of you that you wrote, that you got over your anxiety to write this chapter about investing. Because, but I grew up in a time where, if you weren't good at math and you were a girl, Okay, well, so you're gonna be good at
It's no big
English.
deal.
Sure.
Right, yeah.
Exactly.
Move on, get married, have kids. What about
No, or just focus on the verbal skills.
I'm from BYU, like Mormon community.
Texas,
That's what they would say.
I'm
Just
from
text the same way.
Tribeca, so we didn't say that. No, but to that point, I think so much of this is about how the conversation is conducted because these stories are there. It's far too often that it has to be an exciting thing, right? To hear about a woman in tech who's out there. But a lot of it is I feel like women just go about their business and they get things done, whereas men spend all the time pumping themselves up and talking about it. I mean, if you read any of these books about knowing your worth, like Mika Brzezinski's book, which I would recommend to everybody as well, you know, she talks about just we don't ask for it. We don't verbalize what it is that we want,
because
and then
we're
you're not going
told
to get.
we're told that it's like, well, that's rude to ask for that. You're supposed to sit quietly.
Where do you
and-
get off thinking
Yeah,
that? Like all those
why do you
studies
deserve
about
that?
how men think their CVs
and also-
are perfect for a job, and a woman who's actually completely qualified won't go for it.
Yes.
And what about the investors? Like, so I'm the chapter you mentioned on investors. The Harvard Business School just published in their review the study looking at the questions that investors ask presenters. Right. Did they ask male presenters, so people who are trying to get money for their investment or for their startup? The investors tend to ask them more questions about the upside, whereas they asked female entrepreneurs the questions about the downside. And it's both male and female investors doing the same thing in terms of the bias of their questions. Why do you think it is that way?
I just think we're conditioned. I think we're conditioned that way. I think that we don't see women in those roles often enough, and we definitely address that in the book from a lot of different standpoints. I mean, we have a whole chapter about these accelerators and these boot camps and hackathons that are sort of geared to women to build up their confidence and build up that idea of, not just feeling like you have a right to be there, but also promoting yourself and feeling comfortable in your own skin doing that. And I think that, I mean, I will tell you, I have twin 11-year-olds. I have a boy and a girl, and my daughter's going to an all-girls school this year.
Girls College.
Oh, you did? Where did you go?
I went to Bryn Mawr.
Very nice. My daughter just spent a week at Bryn Mawr this summer doing Alexa Cafe, which is a coding camp.
Oh,
and
awesome.
she did.
Seven Sisters rules.
She really wanted the all girls environment, and she's just flourishing, and it's just wonderful to watch her there. I think that the biggest thing that we can do for our daughters and for our sons, by the way, is to help them understand that everyone has potential to be in these roles. I love what Melinda Gates said last week about the next big idea isn't going to come wrapped in a hoodie, and that the next Bill Gates isn't necessarily going to look like the original Bill Gates. We need to continue to drum that into the next generation and to ourselves, so that we don't accidentally. I mean, we all have unconscious bias. We don't mean to. We've been conditioned this way, right? We got to check ourselves.
Definitely. Be less self-deprecating, ladies.
Yes.
I think that really hurts us. Anyway, thank you so much for writing this and coming and all the success in the world with it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. And thank you all for joining us here for the ride here on Bold TV today. Make sure to join us back here on Bold TV's Facebook page next week, Friday for Bold TV at 10 a.m. and also Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Eastern for Bold Business.
As always, thanks for watching and joining the social media conversation. Keep it going. Have a wonderful weekend.
Bye.